The room went cold before anyone said a word I understood. I felt it in my shoulders first, the way the air in my own dining room shifted from warm to wrong in the space of one sentence. My daughter's fiancé leaned toward his mother, his voice dropping into that easy, private rhythm of Spanish. And I smiled, the way you smile when you assume the joke isn't yours to catch. I had spent the whole evening pouring wine, passing dishes, watching my daughter glow across the table at a man I had helped welcome into this family. My name is Juanita Kingsley, and until that night, I believed I knew exactly who was sitting at my table. We had planned this dinner for weeks. Nicholas and his mother, Letitia, had flown in from Mexico to sit with us before any of the real planning started. No ring yet. No date, just two families learning each other's faces over a meal my husband Grover had insisted be done right. Grover sat at the head of the table, the way he always did, steady, watching more than talking, the way a man does when he's built something with his own hands and learned not to trust rooms too quickly. Somewhere in the flow of Spanish, I watched Letitia's mouth curve into a laugh, easy and warm. The kind that made you feel included even when you weren't. My daughter Jeannie laughed along with her, catching maybe one word in 10, happy just to watch her future mother-in-law enjoy herself. I laughed too, a beat behind, the way you do when you're following a room instead of a conversation. If you're watching this tonight, tell me in the comments what time it is, where you are. I always like knowing who's sitting with me while I tell this. Then Nicholas said something else, quieter, angled toward his mother like it was meant only for her ears. His mother's laugh sharpened into something else, something with an edge under it. And she nodded slow, like she was agreeing to more than a joke. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the sound of a secret. It was Ivy who understood the words. Ivy Delacroix had cooked in my kitchen for 11 years. Quiet, steady. The kind of presence you stop noticing because she never asks you to. She set a dish down in front of Letitia, straightened and cleared her throat. A small sound. Deliberate. The kind of sound a person makes when they've decided something. He said, Ivy repeated, her voice even, aimed at the whole table now. We just need the papers and cash. She's not my type. Nobody moved. Jean's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her face didn't fall so much as go blank, like something behind her eyes had simply switched off. Grover set his glass down without a sound, which frightened me more than if he'd slammed it. Letitia's laugh was still hanging in the air, unfinished, foolish now that it had nowhere to land. She looked at Ivy, the way you look at someone who has broken a rule you didn't know existed. Nicholas opened his mouth, and for one long second, nothing came out of it at all. Grover stood first. He didn't raise his voice. He never does when it matters most. He looked at Nicholas, then at Letitia, and said only, "You need to leave my house." I watched my daughter's fiancé try to find words in a language he thought had protected him. I watched his mother reach for her purse with hands that weren't quite steady anymore. I watched Ivy step back into the kitchen doorway, calm as ever, as if she hadn't just changed the direction of all our lives. The door closed behind them with a sound too soft for what it meant. Jean never looked away from it. Not when the car pulled off. Not when I said her name. Not even when I realized, watching her face, that whatever came next was not going to be decided by me. The silence in my house had a sound to it that night, a kind of ringing quiet that pressed against my ears long after the door closed. We hadn't moved from the dining room. Grover stood by the window with his back to us, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. Jean sat exactly where she'd been sitting, her plate untouched, her eyes still fixed on the space where the door had been. Then my phone buzzed on the table, and all three of us flinched like it had gone off in our chests instead. I looked down. Letitia's name lit up the screen. Juanita, I hope we can talk this through soon, as families do. Misunderstandings happen. Nicholas loves your daughter very much. I read it twice, waiting for anger to be the first thing I felt. Instead, what came first was disbelief, sharp and clean, that a woman who had laughed at what her son said about my daughter could type the word love 40 minutes later like nothing had happened at all. Grover turned when he heard the buzz. Who is it? Letitia. I set the phone face down on the table like it had done something wrong on its own. What does she want? To talk. Like nothing happened. He made a sound low in his throat, not quite a laugh. Of course she does. I turned my phone back over and looked at the message again, my thumb hovering near the screen. Answer. And I give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Ignore. And maybe she reads that as guilt, as room to keep pushing. There's a particular kind of power in choosing not to respond to someone who expects you to. I had learned that a long time before that night, and I chose it again now, deliberately, and set the phone down without typing a single letter. That was when I noticed Jane's phone had lit up too. She hadn't touched it. It sat beside her plate, screen glowing faintly, a name I didn't have to lean in far to read. Nicholas. She didn't reach for it. She didn't look at it either. She just kept staring at the door, her jaw tight in a way that told me she'd felt it buzz before I ever saw it light up, and had decided, in that split second, to pretend she hadn't. Jen, I said quietly. I'm fine. Her voice came out flat, too controlled for a girl who 30 minutes earlier had looked like the floor had opened under her. Grover didn't push. He never does when she gets like that, closed up and careful, though I could see it cost him something not to. He walked over, kissed the top of her head, and told her to get some rest, that we'd talk more in the morning. She nodded without really hearing him. I stayed behind to clear the table, more out of needing my hands busy than any real concern for the dishes. When I came back through the hallway a few minutes later, I saw her on the stairs. Her phone was pressed to her ear, angled away from the hallway light. Her voice pitched low enough that I couldn't make out a single word. She saw me watching. She didn't stop talking. She just turned her body slightly, putting her shoulder between us, and kept climbing. I stood there at the bottom of the stairs for a long moment after she disappeared, my daughter's voice fading into her bedroom, already choosing him over the very room he'd just been thrown out of. Jean sat on the edge of her bed with her door closed, phone in her lap, watching it ring. Nicholas's name lit the screen for the second time that night, and she let it ring twice before she answered, not because she was unsure, but because some part of her wanted him to feel the weight. Hey, he said, and his voice came out soft, careful, the voice of a man who had rehearsed being sorry. I've been trying to reach you. I saw. Jenny, listen to me. What happened tonight? It isn't what it sounded like. You know how things get twisted, coming out of one language into another. My mother laughs at everything. It's just how she is. It doesn't mean... Ivy translated it exactly, Jane said. Word for word. A pause. Not long, but long enough that she noticed it. I wasn't talking about you the way it sounded. I was talking about paperwork stuff, family stuff. It got confused. She wanted to believe him. Wanting to believe someone you love isn't a weakness. It's just what love does before it learns better. So she let the silence stretch, waiting for him to fill it with something that made sense. The phone warm against her ear, her own heartbeat loud in the quiet of her room. He filled it instead with a question that had nothing to do with an apology at all. Is your dad still upset? I mean, upset enough that he's talking about changing anything with the business, or is it just tonight talking? She went still. Not because the question was loud or cruel, because it was the wrong question entirely, arriving at the wrong moment, dressed up like concern, but shaped like something else. She didn't answer right away. She sat with it a second longer than she meant to, turning it over, waiting to feel foolish for even noticing it at all. He heard the silence and moved fast to cover it. I just mean, I know your family. Everything's connected. You know? The wedding. The future. I don't want your dad doing something rash because of one bad night. That's all I meant. I care about what happens to all of us. All of us. She turned the phrase over once in her mind and set it down, because it was easier to set it down than to hold it. I just want us to be okay, he said, softer now, back in the voice she recognized. Can we please just talk properly, in person, once things calm down? I love you, Janie. That hasn't changed. She almost said it back. Instead, she said, okay, we'll talk, because it was simpler than everything else sitting in her chest, and because some small, stubborn part of her still needed tonight to be a misunderstanding and not the truth. Thank you, he said, relief loud in his voice. I'll call you tomorrow. She hung up and sat there a moment, staring at the phone like it might explain itself if she waited long enough. The business question sat wrong in her stomach, small and strange. The kind of thing you almost mention to someone and then don't, because saying it out loud might make it real. She thought about calling him back just to ask it plainly and then didn't, telling herself there would be time for that later, once things were calmer, once she understood her own unease well enough to name it. She didn't hear the door. I was standing in it before she looked up, and from my face alone she knew I'd heard enough. Not every word, but enough of her voice, low and careful, to know exactly whose name had kept her up past midnight. You'd already decided, Janie said, and her voice had an edge to it I hadn't heard from her before, not once in 26 years. Before he even opened his mouth tonight, you and Dad had already decided he wasn't good enough. I stood in her doorway, still in my nightgown, and I let her say it, because grief needs somewhere to go, and I would rather it come at me than sit rotting inside her. That's not true, I said. Isn't it? You watched him all night like you were waiting for him to slip. Both of you did. I could have told her that wasn't fair. I could have reminded her what we'd all heard with our own ears, what Ivy had translated plainly. No room left for doubt. Instead, something else came up out of me, something I hadn't planned to say and couldn't stop once it started. I was the one who wanted to invite them, I said. Your father wasn't sure. He said we barely knew Nicholas, that meeting the family this soon felt rushed. I was the one who pushed. I liked him, Janie. I liked him before your father did. She went still. I hadn't meant to say it. Not like that. Not tonight. But it was true. And once it was out of my mouth, I understood I'd been carrying it since the dinner ended, waiting for somewhere to set it down. You liked him, she repeated, like the words didn't fit together right in her mouth. I did. He was charming, attentive. He asked good questions. I heard myself and hated how thin it sounded now, held up against what we knew. I told your father he was being overly cautious. I told him to give Nicholas a chance. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. I watched something shift behind my daughter's eyes, the anger not gone but rearranging itself around a new shape. Then why? She said slowly. Do you sound like you regret it? I hadn't planned to answer that either, but I was done keeping things from her tonight. Because there was something, I said. Weeks ago, small enough that I told myself it was nothing. Jeannie sat up straighter. What? I hesitated, because saying it out loud made it real in a way that thinking it privately never had. What exactly did you notice? She asked it plainly, no anger in it now, just a need to know. And I realized this was the first real question she'd asked me all night that wasn't really about defending him. I thought of the dinner months back, the four of us at that little Italian place before the Arandas had even booked their flights. Nicholas leaning across the table, easy smile, asking your father, casually, like it was nothing, how the ownership was structured on the new development downtown, whether it was solely his name on the paperwork or whether family was listed too. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Men ask about a woman's father's work. It seemed like interest, not strategy. He asked your father, I said slowly, whose name was actually on the company, whether it was just his or whether anyone else's was listed alongside it. I watched the question land on my daughter's face the way a stone lands in still water, the ripple moving out from the center long after. The stone itself has disappeared beneath the surface. Nicholas's apartment smelled like coffee gone cold, and I only know this because Jenny told me herself once there was nothing left to protect, by keeping it quiet. He'd stepped out to take a call from his cousin, phone pressed to his ear as he paced the hallway outside, and Jean sat alone on his couch with his laptop open on the table where he'd left it, still logged into whatever he'd been doing before she arrived. He'd never been careful about it around her. She'd sat in that same spot a dozen times before, waiting while he showered or ran downstairs for something, his laptop left open the way people leave things open around someone they trust completely. She wasn't looking for anything. She wants that understood, and I believe her, because my daughter has never been the kind of woman who goes searching through a man's things. She was simply sitting there, waiting, scrolling her own phone, when his laptop chimed softly with a notification sliding down from the corner of the screen. She didn't mean to read it. That's the truth of it. Her eyes just went where the sound went, the way anyone's would. A name she didn't recognize, a message preview cut short, ending mid-sentence. Something about a wire, something about once it clears. Underneath the name, a country code she didn't recognize either. Not Mexico. Somewhere else entirely. She sat very still. It could have been nothing. A cousin. A friend. Some transaction that had a perfectly boring explanation. She told herself that immediately. The way you reach for the calm explanation before you're ready for the other kind. But something in her chest had already gone cold and alert, in a way it hadn't been a second before, and no amount of telling herself it was nothing made that feeling loosen its grip. She heard his voice getting closer in the hallway, wrapping up his call, and she did something she'd never had to do with him before. She performed. She closed nothing, touched nothing, simply looked away from the screen and picked her phone back up, arranging her face into the soft, easy expression she always wore around him, as if the last 30 seconds hadn't happened at all. Sorry about that, Nicholas said, dropping onto the couch beside her, sliding his laptop closed without a glance at it. Family stuff. You know how it is. I know how it is, she said, and her voice came out light, natural, nothing in it to give her away. He talked for a while after that, about nothing important. And she nodded in the right places and laughed once at the right moment. And the whole time some new, watchful part of her sat just behind her eyes, taking notes. She didn't ask him about the name. She didn't ask him about the wire or the country code or any of it. Some instinct she didn't yet have words for told her that asking would only teach him to hide better. And for the first time in their entire relationship, She wanted to know more than she wanted to be reassured. That night, alone in her room, she sat on her bed with her laptop closed and her phone open, thumb hovering over the search bar for a long moment before she typed his name in full, first and last, and pressed search. She didn't sleep much that night, and by the next afternoon she was back at it, sitting cross-legged on her bed with her laptop open. The name of the company Nicholas claimed to run typed carefully into the search bar, the way he'd said it to her father months before, at that little Italian place, so casually she hadn't thought to question it since. The page loaded slower than it should have. She watched the little wheel spin and felt her pulse tick up to match it, which struck her as strange, because she didn't yet know what she was afraid of finding. Nothing came up. Not exactly nothing. A scattering of unrelated results. A shoe repair shop in Guadalajara. A defunct blog. Nothing that matched the import-export business he'd described in detail more than once. The one he said had offices near the address he'd given her for his family home. A basic search wasn't enough to trust, she decided. Not for something this important. Anyone could bury or scrub a name online. So she found Mexico's public business registry instead, the kind of official record that couldn't simply be wished away, and searched the company name there, then the address, patient with the clunky, unfamiliar interface until it finally returned something real. A business did exist at that address, registered under a name close to his, but not quite. The surname slightly different. The first name absent altogether, replaced with initials. She stared at it long enough that the letters started to blur, waiting for it to rearrange itself into something that made sense. Her phone buzzed against her knee. "Hey, what are you up to?" Nicholas, mid-afternoon, casual as ever. Her thumb hovered over the screen. For one unsteady second, she considered typing exactly what she was doing, watching his face on the other end of it collapse or explain or lie. And something in her, new, careful, not yet fully formed, told her that wasn't the move. Not yet. "Just running errands," she typed back. "Talk later?" "Of course. Miss you." She set the phone face down and looked back at the screen, at the mismatched name sitting there like a splinter under skin, confirmed now by a record that didn't lie the way a website could. She thought about calling him right then and asking him to explain it. She thought about how easily he'd explained away the dinner, how smooth his voice had gotten at exactly the moment he needed it to be. If she asked now, she understood suddenly she wouldn't get the truth. She'd get another performance. So she decided, sitting there with her knees drawn up and the laptop's glow against her face, that she wouldn't ask yet. She would watch instead. Gather instead. Let him believe nothing had changed while she quietly learned exactly what had. It was a decision that cost her something to make. Some old, trusting part of herself she was setting aside on purpose, maybe for good. But she made it anyway. And once it was made, she felt strangely steadier than she had in days. She kept scrolling. An old photo surfaced from a mutual friend's page, years old by the look of it. Nicholas younger, standing beside a car she didn't recognize, tagged by someone else in the caption. The tag wasn't his name. It was a name she had never once heard him use. Not to her, not to her father, not to anyone. The name in the photo tag led her to a profile, and the profile led her to a woman with kind eyes and a wedding planning business somewhere outside Houston. And Jean sat with her thumb over the message button for a long time before she finally typed something simple. "Hi, I'm sorry to reach out like this. I saw you tagged in an old photo with someone named Nicholas. I think you may know him from a few years back. I just have a quick question, if you don't mind." She sent it and set the phone down, expecting nothing, or at best, a slow reply days from now if it came at all. That wasn't what happened. Her phone buzzed within 4 minutes. "I don't know anyone by that name. Wrong person." Jean stared at the message, something in her chest going tight and confused at once. 4 minutes. She looked back at the photo. The tag was clear, the woman's own account, her own hand behind the caption years ago. This wasn't a stranger scrolling past a random message. This was someone who had opened it, read it, and answered fast enough that there hadn't been time to think it over. She typed back carefully. I understand. I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to ask. The message wouldn't send. She tried again. A small red exclamation point appeared beside it instead. And when she tapped the woman's name, the profile that had been there 30 seconds earlier was simply gone. No photo. No bio. Nothing to click. Blocked. Jean sat very still, phone in her lap, and felt the confusion in her chest start to reorganize itself into something sharper. A woman who genuinely didn't know a man wouldn't need to answer in 4 minutes flat. She wouldn't need to block a stranger's polite, harmless question. People who have nothing to hide don't run that fast from a question that doesn't threaten them. She sat with that thought a while, turning it over the way you turn over a stone to see what's underneath. If it truly meant nothing, silence would have cost her nothing. Silence was free. A block wasn't. A block took effort, took a decision, took someone deciding in real time that this conversation was dangerous enough to end outright. She thought of her mother telling her about the ownership question at that dinner months ago, how something so small had sat wrong long after it should have been forgotten. This felt the same. Small, wrong. Impossible to explain away cleanly, no matter how many times she tried. She opened her screenshots before she'd even fully decided to. The message, the 4-minute reply, the block, the vanished profile. Capturing all of it while it still existed. Some instinct telling her that evidence like this had a way of disappearing if you didn't move fast enough. Days passed after that, with nothing. She checked periodically out of habit more than hope, half convinced the trail had simply closed for good the way the profile had. It was almost a week later, late at night and half by accident, that a notification slid down from a different account entirely. One she didn't recognize by name, but whose small profile photo looked unmistakably like the same woman. Different angle, different hair. The kind of second account people quietly keep for exactly this reason. A story had just been posted. 24 hours, then gone. No caption beyond 6 words. White text over a plain black background. The kind of thing you post when you want to say something without quite saying it. Some men don't deserve warnings twice. Jean read it 3 times before she took a screenshot of that too. Her hands steady now in a way they hadn't been minutes before. It took her 2 more days to find the second woman, and when she did, Jean sat staring at the message box longer than she had with the first. This photo was older, grainier, pulled from an account that hadn't posted in over a year. Nicholas stood beside a woman with her arm looped through his, both of them younger, both of them smiling in a way that looked uncomfortably like the way he smiled at Jane now. The tag beneath the photo used his real name, not the mismatched surname from the business registry, not the name from the first photo, his actual name, the one Janie had known him by from the beginning. Her thumb hovered over the message button for a long time. After the first woman's 4-minute wall, some new caution had settled into her, a reluctance to burn another lead the same way. She kept it short this time. Hi, I don't want to alarm you. I think we may know the same person, and I have a few questions if you're open to it. No pressure at all if not. She set the phone down and made herself get up, make tea, do anything but stare at the screen. It was nearly an hour before it buzzed. Who's asking, and why? Not a wall, a question. Guarded, but a door left open a crack instead of slammed shut. My name is Jane. I think Nicholas and I might be involved with the same man, at different times. The reply took longer this time. several minutes stretching out while Jane sat perfectly still, watching the little dots appear and disappear twice before a full message finally came through. How did this start for you? Tell me first, before I say anything. Jane typed carefully, giving her the shape of it without the family, without the business, just the outline. How fast things moved, how attentive he'd been, how easily he talked about a future neither of them had earned yet. The woman's reply came almost instantly this time, like something in Jane's answer had unlocked her. That's exactly how it started for me too. Word for word, almost. Something in Jane's chest loosened and tightened at the same time, relief and dread arriving together, indistinguishable from each other. She wasn't imagining it. She hadn't overreacted. And now there was a second person on the other end of a phone confirming it, which meant this was no longer a suspicion. It was a pattern. Can we talk? Actually talk, not just text. Yes, the woman wrote back. I'll call you tonight. Jean set the phone down, hands unsteady now in a different way than before. Not fear, exactly. Something closer to standing at the edge of a room she couldn't yet see the size of. One more message came through before the call, a single line that made her sit back up straight. Before we talk, I need you to tell me exactly how fast he asked to meet your family. The call connected, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. Just the small sound of two people breathing on either end of something neither had words for yet. Hi, the woman said finally. Jeannie. So. A breath. How fast did he ask to meet your family? Janie felt the question land somewhere under her ribs. 3 months in. He said it felt right. That he didn't want to waste time on something he already knew. Silence on the line, long enough that Jenny almost asked if she was still there. 3 months, the woman repeated, quiet. Mine was 10 weeks. Same words, almost. I don't want to waste time. Janie closed her eyes. He told me his family runs an import business back home, that his father built it, that he was next in line to take it over. He told me the exact same thing. A short, humorless laugh. Except when I asked to see it once, video call, anything, there was always a reason it couldn't happen that week. Did he ever ask about your family's money? Not directly. He asked a lot of small questions. What my parents did for work, whether we owned our house outright, whether I had brothers who'd inherit anything before me. Her voice tightened. I didn't think anything of it at the time. It felt like getting to know me. Jean's throat went thick. He asked my father about the ownership structure of his company, whose name was on it, before we were even engaged. Jenny? The woman said her name carefully, like she was choosing to trust her with something. I need you to know this wasn't new for him. Whatever you're feeling right now, confused, like maybe you're overreacting, you're not. Janie's composure, which had held steady through every discovery up to this point, cracked for the first time on that call. A single unsteady breath she couldn't quite keep silent. I'm sorry, the woman said, softer now. I know how this feels. I sat exactly where you're sitting 18 months ago. What happened? Between you two? I started asking questions he didn't like. He got cold, distant. And then one day, he was just gone. No fight, no explanation. He blocked me everywhere within a week. Jenny pressed her palm flat against her chest, trying to steady something that didn't want to be steadied. Did you ever find out anything about him before you two? About his past? The woman was quiet for a moment. Once. Early on, he'd had a few drinks, and he said something about trouble back home. I asked what kind. He shut it down fast, said it was nothing, family stuff, and never brought it up again. I let it go because I wanted to. Say more, Janie said, surprising herself with how steady her own voice came out, grief and clarity fighting for the same breath. Please. Anything you remember. The woman exhaled slowly on the other end of the line. He didn't leave Mexico because he wanted to. The woman gave her a phrase to search before they hung up. Not his name, just a term in Spanish she said had come up once, years ago. In a moment, he clearly regretted letting slip. The first night got her nowhere. Janie sat translating pieces of Spanish news archives with a browser tool until nearly 2 in the morning, one dead end after another. A soccer scandal that used the same phrase differently. A decade-old political story with nothing to do with him. Page after page that led back to itself in circles. She closed the laptop that night with nothing but a headache, and the phrase still sitting unanswered in her mind. The second night, she narrowed it, added the city the woman had mentioned once, added a rough year based on when the trouble must have happened before he left. That produced a name close to his, a man questioned in a fraud case, but the photo attached was wrong, older, heavier, clearly someone else entirely. Another dead end, another hour lost chasing a stranger's face. It was the third night, nearly a week into searching, when a smaller regional outlet's archive finally loaded something that held. The page took its time. She watched the loading bar crawl, her whole body gone still around the weight. And then, the headline resolved into English beneath the original Spanish. A real estate investment scheme. Several families defrauded out of deposits for properties that were never actually for sale. A man questioned by local authorities before quietly leaving the country ahead of formal charges. Beneath the headline, a photo. Younger, a different haircut. But the eyes, the set of the jaw, the particular way he tilted his head toward the camera. She'd have known him anywhere, in any year, under any name. The last thread of doubt she'd been holding on to, some small, stubborn hope that all of this had another explanation, simply died. Not loudly. It just stopped being there, the way a held breath finally lets go. The article named the scheme plainly. It named one victim by initials only, a woman whose deposit had never been returned, whose case had reportedly stalled once the man in question left the country. No formal charges filed, no warrant that Janie could find, just a trail that went cold the moment he crossed a border, the same way she now understood. He intended to disappear from this family too, once he'd gotten whatever he came for. Her phone lit up beside her. Can't sleep either? Thinking about you. Miss your voice. Nicholas. Warm, easy, utterly unaware that she was sitting 3 feet from a translated fraud report, with his own face staring back at her from the screen. 3 nights of searching, finally behind her. She looked at the message for a long moment. Some earlier version of herself would have felt her stomach twist with guilt at what she now knew, and he didn't. That version of her was gone. Can't sleep. Long night, she typed back, calm, unhurried, exactly the tone he expected. Get some rest. Love you. She set the phone face down without answering that part at all, and looked instead at the article still open beside it, at the photo of a man who had done this before, who was doing it again, who had no idea the family he'd chosen this time had a daughter capable of finding him in the dark, however long it took. She had enough now. Enough to bring to her parents. Enough to stop watching and start moving. She sat back against her headboard, the glow of the screen the only light in the room, and realized, with something like surprise, that the fear she'd been carrying since that dinner had quietly gone somewhere else entirely. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She was ready for him. Jean came downstairs the next morning with a folder under her arm instead of the look we'd all gotten used to seeing on her face these past weeks. No tears, no apology in her posture. She set the folder on the kitchen table between us like she was laying down cards she'd been holding a long time. "I need you both to sit down," she said, "and I need you to let me finish before either of you says anything." Grover set down his coffee slowly, watching her the way he watches a room before he decides how to move through it. I pulled out a chair without a word. She opened the folder and walked us through it, piece by piece, steady as a woman reading a report she'd rehearsed. Screenshots. A translated article with his younger face staring up at us from the page. A name that didn't match the business he'd claimed. A woman's voice she'd recorded notes from, careful never to name her. Just called her someone who knew him before. I watched my husband's jaw tighten with every new page, watched something in him go rigid and dangerous in a way I recognized from years of marriage. The particular stillness he gets right before he stops being patient. "That's enough," Grover said when she reached the article. "That's more than enough. I'm calling the police tonight." "Dad, wait." "Wait for what, Jeannie? You just showed me a man with a fraud case tied to his name." "An unofficial case. No charges. No warrant." Her voice stayed even, though I could see what it cost her to keep it that way. "If we go in with a translated article and secondhand testimony, we hand him time to disappear before anyone can build something that actually holds." Grover looked at me, expecting me to side with him the way I usually did when his temper ran ahead of his patience. I didn't say anything right away, and that silence told him more than words would have. "I've already spoken to someone," Jane said. "An attorney. Just a consultation. Nothing official yet." She explained what we actually have, legally, and what we don't. There's a right way to do this that doesn't let him slip through a gap because we moved too fast. I felt something swell in my chest that had nothing to do with fear. My daughter, who 3 weeks ago hadn't wanted to hear a word against this man, was sitting at our table, speaking like someone who had already thought 4 steps past where the rest of us stood. Grover exhaled hard through his nose, the fight in him looking for somewhere to go and finding nowhere to land against the calm she was holding. "You're asking me to wait. With everything I know now. I'm asking you to trust me with this, once, all the way." The silence stretched long enough that I heard the refrigerator hum. Then Grover nodded, once, sharp, a man conceding ground he didn't want to give. "Fine," he said. "We do it your way. But I want to know every step." "You will." Jean closed the folder, and for a moment I thought that was the end of it. The whole conversation settled. "There's one more thing," she said instead, not looking at either of us now. "Before we go to anyone official, I need to see him one more time." The attorney's office smelled like fresh paper and the particular calm of a room where hard news gets delivered often enough that the walls have absorbed it. She was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed, and she didn't waste time on comfort before she started talking. "I want to be honest with you from the start," she said, folder open in front of her, "because I think that serves you better than false hope. Based on what you've shown me, your family isn't the direct victim of a chargeable theft. Nothing was actually taken from you. No money changed hands, no property, nothing he obtained through deception from this household specifically." Grover sat forward. "He came into my home planning to take from my daughter. That's not enough? Intent alone is difficult to prosecute without a completed act," she said, gently but without softening the substance of it. "What you have is compelling, but it doesn't sit squarely inside a theft charge against him here." I watched my husband's hands tighten on the arms of his chair, frustration with nowhere honest to go, the law refusing to move at the speed of his anger. "What do we have then?" Jane said. Not defeated, just precise. already 3 steps ahead of the disappointment the rest of us were still sitting in. The attorney turned to her, something like respect crossing her face at the question. You have something valuable, just not in the form you expected. Your evidence corroborates the account of another woman with an active complaint. That strengthens her case significantly. And separately, what you found about his immigration status, the overstay, that's something we can report independently. It won't produce an arrest overnight, but it starts a process he can't simply talk his way out of. So nothing happens to him because of what he tried to do to us, Grover said. Only because of paperwork and someone else's case. That's the law as it exists, the attorney said. I know that's not satisfying. Jean sat quietly with that for a moment, and I watched her turn the disappointment over and set it down the same way she'd been doing for weeks now, choosing the useful thing over the emotional one. There's something else, the attorney said, depending on what you're considering next. Georgia is a one-party consent state. That means if you're part of a conversation, you can legally record it without the other person's knowledge or permission. It wouldn't apply retroactively to anything you've already gathered. But going forward, if there were ever a conversation you wanted documented properly, that's within your rights. Janie went very still. So, if he said all of it again, she said slowly, out loud, to me, it could be on the record. Legally, yes, as long as you're a party to the conversation. I saw the shift happen behind my daughter's eyes, something settling into place with the quiet finality of a decision already made. How do I get him to say it again? She asked, without him knowing that's what's happening. Nicholas chose the restaurant, the same one he'd taken her to on their third date. And when Jean walked in, he stood to pull out her chair with the easy confidence of a man who believed the worst of this was already behind them. You look good, he said, sitting back down, reaching for her hand across the table. I've missed this. Missed you. I've missed you too, she said, and let him hold her hand, her phone sitting face down beside her water glass, recording quietly into the space between them. They ordered. He talked about small things first. His mother asking about her. His hope that all of this would blow over soon, that families forgive things eventually. Jane nodded along, patient, waiting for the door she needed him to walk through on his own. I keep thinking about the wedding, he said eventually, leaning in. Once your dad calms down. I don't want to lose momentum on everything we planned. What did we plan, exactly? She asked, light, curious, nothing in her voice to suggest the question was anything but casual. You know, doing it here, doing it right, so nobody could ever question it later. He smiled, entirely at ease. I never wanted shortcuts with you. I wanted it clean. With you, it could have been clean. Could have been? Can still be, he corrected quickly. If your family gives us a real chance. She let a small silence sit there, the kind he'd always rushed to fill before, and true to form, he filled it now. Look, I know how it sounded that night, but you have to understand. Timing matters for me right now, more than people realize. I got impatient. Said something stupid to my mother that came out wrong. What did you mean then? By the timing. He hesitated, just slightly, and reached for his water instead of answering right away. Just that some things are easier when a family already has what it has. Stability. Room to build on. I never said that out loud because it sounds worse than it is. Wanting a good life isn't a crime. No, she said quietly. It isn't. Unless you're using someone to get it. Something flickered across his face, the first genuine unease she'd seen from him all night. But he recovered fast, laughing it off, reaching for her hand again. I would never use you. I love you. She let him hold her hand one more moment, memorizing how easily the lie still came to him even now, then gently pulled it back. I think I have everything I need, she said. Everything you need for what? She stood, reached for her phone, and pressed it once, firmly, ending the recording without looking away from him. Goodbye, Nicholas, she said, and walked out of the restaurant without waiting to watch his face understand what had just happened, his name leaving her mouth for the last time, sounding like nothing at all. It took nearly 4 months after that dinner at the restaurant. 4 months of ordinary days that slowly stopped feeling like waiting at all, before the knock finally came on a Tuesday morning, plain in every way, except for what it carried with it. We stood in our own driveway, the three of us, when 2 officers walked up to the door of the extended stay apartment the Arandas had been renting, since the engagement that never happened, since the dinner that ended everything before it began. Jenny had asked to be there, not to speak, just to see it. Nicholas opened the door still in yesterday's clothes, and I watched his face move through recognition, confusion, and then something closer to understanding, all in the space of a few seconds. The way a man's expression changes when a debt he thought he'd outrun finally catches up to the address he's standing at. Nicholas Aranda, one of the officers said, we have a warrant for your arrest, out of the case filed against you in another state. He explained it plainly as he worked, a criminal complaint from the other family, strengthened months back by what Janie had gathered, had finally moved through the system and produced exactly this. Separately, he said, there was a federal immigration matter already underway regarding his status, one that would proceed on its own track once this was resolved. His composure, the thing he'd worn so easily across every dinner, every phone call, every rehearsed apology, simply gave out. He didn't argue. He didn't perform. He just stood there, smaller than I had ever seen him, while the thing he'd built out of charm and careful timing came apart in real time on his own doorstep. Letitia appeared behind him, already talking before anyone asked her to. I don't know anything about this. Whatever he's done, I had no part in it. I'm his mother, that's all. Ma'am, the second officer said, we have some questions for you as well. I laughed at a joke, she said, her voice climbing. That's all I did that night. I laughed. I thought of that laugh. I remembered it clearly, the ease of it, the way it had landed in our dining room like something practiced, something that already knew exactly what it was agreeing to. There was nothing confused in that sound. There had been nothing innocent in it either. She didn't get to unlaugh it now. Jean stood beside me, arms crossed loosely, watching without a single word. I glanced at her, half expecting triumph, some flash of the anger she'd carried for months finally getting its moment. What I saw instead was something quieter, steadier. A woman simply present for the ending of something she had built, piece by careful piece, entirely on her own terms. Nicholas looked up once, past the officers, and found her eyes across the small distance of that doorway. Whatever he was hoping to see there, he didn't find it. She looked back at him the way you look at a stranger whose face happens to be familiar. Nothing left in it that belonged to him anymore. He was the one who looked away first. We stood there a while longer, watching the process unfold the way these things actually do, slow and procedural and entirely unglamorous. My daughter had not needed to raise her voice once. The table was set the same way it always had been. Ivy's hands moving between kitchen and dining room, with the same quiet rhythm she'd kept for 11 years, as if that night months ago had never once interrupted the pattern of this house. Grover said, "Grace," the way he always does, short, plain, grateful. Jean sat across from me, laughing at something small Grover said about the contractor giving him trouble on a project downtown, and the sound of it landed different in my chest than it used to. Lighter, somehow, and also not. A laugh with something underneath it now that hadn't been there before that dinner. Ivy set a dish down in front of her, the same easy motion as always, and Jean looked up and thanked her by name, warmly, the way she always had. Nothing between them had changed. If anything, something had deepened, an understanding neither of them needed to speak aloud. I watched my daughter reach for her phone once, mid-meal, and do something I'd never seen her do before that season. She turned it face down without looking at whatever had lit up the screen, set it deliberately out of reach, and returned her full attention to the table. A small thing. She probably didn't even notice herself doing it anymore. But I noticed. I noticed the woman who used to answer every buzz without thinking now, choosing, every time, what deserved her attention and what didn't. "You're quiet, Mama," she said, catching me watching her. "Just thinking," I said. "About?" I could have told her the truth right then. That I was thinking about the girl who used to see the good in everyone before she'd earned the right to. And the woman sitting across from me now who still saw the good in people but no longer mistook it for proof of anything. I didn't say all that. Some things are better carried quietly than spoken at a dinner table. "About how far we've come since spring," I said instead. She smiled. And there was nothing broken in it. Nothing hardened either. Just something settled. Something that had learned exactly how much of itself to give away. And to whom. Grover reached over and squeezed her hand once, the way he'd done 100 times before, and for a moment it looked like any other family dinner in this house. Warm and unremarkable. The kind of evening you don't think to hold on to until much later, once you understand what it cost to get back to. I looked at my daughter across that table. Steady, composed, entirely herself again, but sharper now, in the way a blade is sharper once it's actually been used. And I understood something I hadn't fully let myself say until that moment. She hadn't just survived what happened to her. She had become someone new because of it. Someone I had raised without ever knowing I was raising her for a night, like the one that started all of this. After that dinner, she did things I never thought she was capable of, till she achieved her purpose.